All right. So, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy just the other day officially launched an impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. And obviously, this is having to do with the allegations of corruption from not just Hunter Biden, but obviously Joe Biden, some way, in some shape or form, being directly involved in Hunter's basically trading off of his dad's name and getting all of these jobs that he wasn't really qualified for and making an absolutely ridiculous amount of money from these various international companies. And so there's a lot to get into here. Obviously, I'm going to break down sort of the logistics of how this may play out. Then we're going to get into sort of like the facts of it and whether or not I think Hunter and Joe are actually corrupt in the way that they're alleging. And then I'm going to show you like a Democrat response from John Fetterman, which I thought was absolutely golden. And basically some of the other chaotic things that are going to be thrown in the mix here as this sort of process plays out. So first, let's just go ahead and hear it directly from Kevin McCarthy himself at this press conference.
Taken together, these allegations paint a picture of a culture of corruption. Now, here's what we know so far. Through our investigations, we have found that President Biden did lie to the American people about his own knowledge of his family's foreign business dealings. Eyewitnesses have testified that the president joined on multiple phone calls and had multiple interactions. Dinners resulted in cars and millions of dollars into his son's business partners. We know that bank records show that nearly $20 million in payments were directed to the Biden family members and associates through various shell companies. The Treasury Department alone has more than 150 transactions involving the Biden family and other business associates that were flagged as suspicious activity by U.S. banks. Even a trusted FBI informant has alleged a bribe to the Biden family. Biden used his official office to coordinate with Hunter Biden's business partners about Hunter's role in Burisma, the Ukrainian energy company. Finally, despite these serious allegations, it appears that the president's family has been offered special treatment by Biden's own administration, treatment that not otherwise would have received if they were not related to the president. These are allegations of abuse of power, obstruction, and corruption, and they warrant further investigation by the House of Representatives. That's why today I am directing our House committee to open a formal impeachment inquiry into President Joe Biden. This logical next step will give our committees the full power to gather all the facts and answers for the American public. It's exactly what we want to know, the answers. I believe the president would want to answer these questions and allegations as well.
Okay, so that's the gist of it, right? Now, again, just on like the factual basis of this and whether or not Hunter Biden is corrupt, yeah, of course the guy's corrupt. Of course the guy was going around and trading on his dad's name and, again, getting in these, positions within some of these companies around the world that he otherwise wouldn't have been able to get if his last name wasn't Biden, right? So that's on the one hand. Obviously, Hunter Biden, I think he's had all of these major issues throughout his life. He's been a drug addict. He's been, doing all of these crazy things that we've all seen because Republicans have been throwing them up at all of these committee hearings and throwing it in our face every time that, there's a Hunter Biden dick picture that gets leaked or he's doing like cocaine off of some girl's ass or something like that. We've all seen the chaotic nature of Hunter Biden's lifestyle throughout the years, and we also know his, business relationships with all of these different companies. And so, to me, the idea that Hunter Biden is corrupt is sort of like unquestionable. Obviously, this is nepotism. This is, again, him using his dad's name to make tons and tons and tons of money, but that's Hunter Biden, right? So then the question becomes, how do you and can you directly tie Joe Biden to that corruption, right? Can you say, okay, here Hunter Biden made X amount of money and he influenced his dad to do X policy adjustment when he was the vice president under Barack Obama, and that's sort of the struggle that these Republicans have been dealing with, because keep in mind, they have basically been investigating this since Joe Biden took office, and so far they sort of have all of these different, it's like you have a big board, right, and you're drawing these red lines and connecting strings on a map and sort of pointing things out that maybe look a little bit suspicious, but they haven't actually actually been able to draw any direct, hard, provable evidence that Joe Biden directly participated in Hunter Biden's corruption, right? The best thing that they have that I've seen is that he was sort of on some of these phone calls when Hunter Biden would go out to dinner with some of his business associates. Now, we have reporting that, okay, he was on the phone, but all they talked about was stuff that wasn't really related to the business, and maybe that was some aspect Joe Biden just sort of like being on the phone with his son. And in my opinion, at least, I think that it's more likely, okay, here are basically the two ways that I see it, right? On the one hand, you could think that, you know, Hunter Biden, based on the allegations that Republicans are making, if we assume that all of them are true, with Hunter and Joe being the vice president, and he's this wildly influential guy, right? You basically have to believe that Hunter Biden is one of the most successful foreign lobbyists in the history of the country. Or you could, on the other hand, believe that maybe Joe Biden was maybe like tangentially aware of this stuff, but not directly involved in it. And maybe Hunter Biden was sort of like playing up the amount of influence that he had in terms of like getting policies changed or getting things that are advantageous to his different various, you know, business colleagues and things like that, and sort of was going around lying to these people and calling up his dad and saying, look, I can get my dad on the phone. We have a relationship. I'm going to be good for your business and whatever. And maybe he was just lying and exaggerating, you know, his credentials on that front. And I think the latter is probably a more likely thing. Again, if they come up with some direct evidence that links Joe Biden, good for them. I'm not going to shed a tear if, you know, Joe Biden is, impeached successfully at all. I'm not a Joe Biden supporter in any way, shape, or form. And so I would like to see some of that direct evidence. But again, we're talking about an impeachment. And so you have to actually, like, you can't just float sort of these ideas around and sort of just float these like vague things that may or may not tie Joe Biden to all of this corruption and then think that that's going to be enough. Number one, because Kevin McCarthy basically just pulled like a Michael Scott in this situation. And, you know, when Michael Scott in The Office was basically just like, I declare bankruptcy, and Oscar's like, okay, hold on, that's not actually how you declare bankruptcy. You have to go through like procedure X, Y, and Z, right? Same thing with this. It seems like Kevin McCarthy just thinks he can go out and say we're launching an impeachment inquiry, but they didn't actually have a vote in the House of Representatives. And it seems like one of the blockades that they're going to run into here is if you're trying to get access to Joe Biden's bank records or all of these other, you know, forms or different, you know, pieces of information that you may want to get your hands on, well, you might run into this roadblock here. So from ABC News, they say the Trump era opinion that might stymie the Biden impeachment inquiry. And basically what they're talking about is that under the Trump administration, the Justice Department Office of Legal Counsel was basically putting out opinions that said you can't go after Donald Trump unless there's an official vote in the House that you are like actually launching an impeachment, right? And so it seems like Kevin McCarthy didn't really have the votes because it's a very slim majority in the House that Republicans have, and he wasn't convinced that he was going to be able to get the votes to actually launch in like an official impeachment procedure. And so he basically just like came out and made that press conference and thinks that that's going to be enough. But essentially it looks like the Joe Biden administration, if this ends up getting tied up in the courts, could turn around and could just say like, well, here's the Trump memo from a couple of years ago. We don't have to abide by any of these information requests or subpoenas or whatever the case may be, and maybe the courts will actually side with that. So it's number one, it's like it's not even clear what this is actually going to look like given the fact that you didn't have a vote in the House. Number two, it's not even clear that in the words of Kevin McCarthy that like, oh, we're doing this because we want to get more information. It's not even clear that you're going to be able to get any more information to sort of try to draw more of these hard lines. And then on top of that, another thing that I just want to say about this, we talking about like the logistics of this, right, is that in order to actually impeach a president, what has to happen? Well, you have to impeach him in the House of Representatives, and then what? Then it goes to the Senate. Okay, the Senate is currently controlled by Democrats, right? And you don't even need just a simple majority. You need much more than that in the Senate in order to actually impeach and remove a president from office. So with Democrats in control of the Senate, there is a 0% chance that Biden would actually be impeached from this kind of a thing, right? And so then the question is like, well, is this just virtue signaling? Are you guys just doing this to bump up your own poll numbers or sort of like throw red meat to your base or to hurt Joe Biden going into the 2024 election? Like what is your actual goal from this, knowing that Democrats are in control in the Senate and that they absolutely are not going to impeach Joe Biden? So that's another question that I would have. Now, we did have an interesting response here from Senator John Fetterman, rocking the mustache recently, and I think this basically sums up a good political point that should also be made at the same time as we're talking about this. So let's hear what John Fetterman's response was when somebody asked him about this impeachment.
I asked you about this news that Speaker McCarthy has formally launched an impeachment or has said he's going to.
Oh my God, really? Oh my gosh, it's devastating. Ooh, don't do it. Please don't do it. Oh no.
We gotta run back to the office, but
Okay, so that was a great clip, obviously, but I think there is like sort of a deeper point there almost because, you know, obviously he's not fretting about any of this stuff, right? He doesn't give a shit. He thinks that maybe even potentially this could help Joe Biden. I mean, think about what happened to Donald Trump when he beat the impeachments that were launched against him. Sort of led to a bump in the poll for Trump because all of the headlines are, oh, Trump just beat impeachment. What if this happens to Joe Biden in a similar way? And then all of the headlines are, Joe Biden just defeated this impeachment, right? It could actually turn around and end up helping Joe Biden instead of hurting him in the way that Republicans think that it may. Now, maybe they're wrong about that, but I think that there's a reason why, you know, John Fetterman would have this kind of a response here. And so getting a little bit more into the evidence, I also thought that this was an interesting clip here. So here we have the Freedom Caucus chairman, Representative Scott Perry, getting heated when a British reporter was questioning him on what actual evidence he has that would tie the Hunter Biden corruption directly to Joe Biden. So let's hear what he had to say about this. Kind of a meltdown here, kind of an absolute freak out.
That. I don't think it'd be appropriate. All right, last question. Yes, ma'am.
Can I just ask, what actual evidence do you have as opposed to allegations to show to the American public that would merit an actual impeachment inquiry of Joe Biden and prove that today isn't just about some of you...
Oh, I don't know.
McCarthy for the sake of enacting political revenge.
This isn't about political revenge. We have the bank accounts. We can see, ma'am, you can see that the homes that the Bidens own can't be afforded on a congressional or Senate salary. You also understand that it's not normal for family members to receive millions of dollars from overseas interests. Those things aren't normal. That's not normal to have 20 shell companies. These things are not normal, and it alludes to not only just widespread corruption, but money laundering, if not influence peddling itself. And we also have the president, the vice president at the time, on record saying that the prosecutor was fired. Well, son of a bitch, the prosecutor was fired, right? Because the prosecutor was going after the company that his son was working on. That's what we have. If you can't see that, if you are that blunt, look, I'll turn it over to the attorneys.
Okay. So, some things I want to focus in on there. So, first of all, my understanding of the prosecutor that he's referring to in Ukraine is that was sort of like official U.S. government policy, and it was also the preferred option for a lot of European countries as well, even before a lot of this Hunter Biden stuff came up and before he was working at Burisma. So, I think he may be a little bit confused about how that entire process came out. And actually, I think that a lot of these agencies, the reason why they wanted that prosecutor removed was because they weren't going after Burisma hard enough on corruption issues. But I may be getting confused about that. Maybe he's confusing me about that situation. But regardless, I think the other things were also funny at the same time, where first of all, at the end of that statement, he says these things are alluding to corruption and bribery and all of these things. Well, that's not good enough for impeachment, right? Again, I believe that Joe Biden is corrupt. I think that Joe Biden is corrupt in the same way that every U.S. politician is corrupt in many different ways, and I'll get to that here in a second. But in order to actually impeach somebody, you can't just allude to corruption, right? I mean, that's like the funniest part about all of this, right? She asks, what direct evidence do you have? And he points out like vague things like, well, his bank records, and well, his family was able to afford things that you wouldn't be able to afford on a congressional salary. Well, hang on a second. That applies to virtually all of Congress. Our Congress is made up of like more than half of Congress right now is millionaires, okay? You don't become a millionaire from a congressional salary, right? I mean, I just talked about yesterday, Nancy Pelosi, 83 years old, worth over $100 million, skyrocketing net worth throughout her tenure in the House of Representatives. How do you think she made that money? How do you think all of these motherfuckers become this rich? It's because of corruption, right? And so that's sort of like my biggest hang-up about the Joe Biden impeachment thing is two things, I would say. Number one is that, yes, of course Joe Biden is corrupt. He's corrupt in the same way that the entire DC swamp is corrupt. All of these motherfuckers take money from corporations and from billionaires and then turn around and do the bidding of those corporations and billionaires. That's the same kind of corruption that the Republican Party fervently defends, right? This is the same party that says that money is the same thing as speech, okay, in political elections, and that dark money super PAC should be able to dump infinite sums of money to keep these people in power, right? So you're not actually against corruption. Don't pretend as if you're really against corruption, right? You're picking and choosing this like specific instance of possible connection to like a pay for play scheme, but like you're all doing pay for play. We just because we've legalized a system of corruption and bribery in this country doesn't mean that you're like above the fray and that you're not corrupt. You're all fucking corrupt, okay? So I wish that they would be a little bit more honest about that. that, I mean, if we're really trying to go after corruption, probably half these, more than half, 99% of these people within Congress would be getting charged. They would be getting indicted. They would be getting impeached. They would be getting thrown out of office and thrown into a fucking jail cell. Okay, we all know that you're all corrupt. Okay, so that's sort of the first thing that bothers me about this, is like, you don't need to, again, like, put up a board and connect all of these red lines to each other to prove corruption. No, he is corrupt. He's corrupt in the same way that you guys are corrupt. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is that it's almost as if all of these Republicans forgot what Donald Trump did during his administration. Are we all forgetting that Donald Trump put his son-in-law in charge of Middle Eastern foreign policy, Jared Kushner, and he goes and he implements policies that are favorable to the Israelis. He implements policies that are favorable towards the Saudis. And then, oh, what do you know? He's made not millions, billions of dollars off of these countries. He has made over $2 billion just from the Saudis towards his bullshit investment firm after Trump left office. Okay, Trump, not, it's like they try to make this point that Joe Biden made money or kickbacks or something, or helped his son make money while he was a vice president and Hunter was off doing his own business shit, right? But then they completely forget Trump not only did that, he had his kids in the White House with him. Okay, Ivanka in the White House with him as she was making money off of her foreign business deals, as Donald Trump was openly doing things that were favorable to those countries. So it's like, everything that you were saying about Joe Biden, even if I believe all of it, Donald Trump did the same fucking shit. Why are you guys not going after him for the same thing? And it looks like that some Democrats are trying to make that point, and I wish they were making it a lot more clear, right? And it looks like they may try to potentially look more in to Jared Kushner and his corruption and all of that good stuff. So I hope that they do, push forward with that. But again, it's so fucking annoying that we know our entire political system is rotten to the core, and then we have an example like this of Hunter Biden going off and trading off of his dad's name, and suddenly they act like Washington, D.C. isn't full of nepotism. Washington, D.C. isn't full of motherfuckers who are getting their kids in job positions and who are helping their kids profit from their position in power. You guys are all doing that. I mean, half of Washington would be in a jail cell right now if that was considered illegal. Okay, but they just pick and whatever. So that's the other point that I just wanted to make about that. Now, I'll finish off here with some other complicating factors that are going to make this entire process a lot more interesting and complicated. So here from CNN, they say McCarthy faces a threat to oust him as speaker. This was after he just announced this impeachment inquiry from guys like Matt Gaetz. So Matt Gaetz went up, he did this whole speech in Congress, and he's saying, Kevin McCarthy, you broke all of these promises that you made when we agreed to make you speaker at the time. And so it looks like this is also going to be a part of this entire process over the next couple of weeks, is you're going to have some subset of these, very far, even further right Republicans that are going to be trying to get rid of Kevin McCarthy as he's also launching this impeachment. And then also, by the way, at the same time as all of this bullshit is playing out, you're also going to have a government fight over whether or not the government is going to shut down. Okay, so now we're going to have to deal not only with people who want to oust McCarthy, but also people who want to freeze government spending and have all of these other different issues that they want to bring up before a deadline that I think is coming at the end of the month. So we have a couple of weeks now until this government shutdown is going to happen, and we have to somehow hope that they figure all of this shit out with whether or not they're going to keep McCarthy in power, whether or not they're going to have a vote on impeachment for Joe Biden, whether or not they're going to actually fund the government and that the government's not just going to shut down again. So I mean, again, it is a massive, massive, massive clusterfuck. Okay, all of this. I think Republicans are deeply confused about how this process can play out and whether or not this is actually going to even be beneficial for them. It seems like they're a little bit lost in the sauce here. Now, again, I'll finish off and just say this. Yes, of course, Joe Biden is corrupt. I don't know whether or not he was getting kickbacks for some Hunter Biden business deal or his family was getting kickbacks, whatever. I don't really care about that kind of corruption as much as I actually care about the legalized, institutionalized corruption in this country, which all of these people are guilty of. And so I wish we had a lot more conversations about that kind of thing than whether or not, Hunter Biden was off trading on his dad's name and doing blow off some girl's ass or something like that, right? And, taking sex videos or whatever the fuck. I wish instead of talking about that stuff, we were actually talking about how the U.S. government operates, how you guys are all in the pockets of the wealthy in this country, and actually move forward in terms of addressing some of that. So it's definitely going to be interesting. I'll keep you guys updated. Again, we have government shutdown. We have potential fights over who's going to be the Speaker of the House. We have a potential fight over, this impeachment inquiry and whether or not the courts are going to hold this up and allow them to go after information on Joe Biden. So it's about to get messy.